Ladies and gentlemen, we are live!
Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Fegley, and we are live, coming to you from the 1148 studios. And joining me, as always, is
Trace Trolko. Hello, everyone.
All right. Well, we're here. We're doing this thing live. Hopefully, somebody is tuned in. Hopefully, we're not sitting here by ourselves. It's perfectly possible, I guess, that we are.
No safety net this week.
Yeah, so we're live, we're doing this, we're going to do another one of these things coming up on February 5th with a couple more people involved. Tonight, later on, we're going to be taking your calls. I guess I should switch the graphic there to live so it doesn't say please stand by anymore. Just, it happens. Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody here, but who cares? So later on, we're going to be talking to Brandon Hellwig.
Of UCFsports.com. What's the call-in number?
Well, I'm going to put that up later.
Oh, are you?
Because I don't want people calling now.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
So I will put that up later, and we are going to take calls tonight. Hopefully that all works out. I guess we're head-to-head right now with a football game that's going on, the Steelers and the Broncos.
So sort of like the Puppy Bowl against the Super Bowl.
Right, yeah.
We're counter-programming.
Yeah,
the AFC
well, it may not
game.
have been the greatest idea to do that, and I'm sure most people are probably watching that. Hopefully some of you are listening to this. I don't know, though. There could be absolutely zero people out there. If there's anybody here, send a little chat and tell us if you're there.
Say something.
Wave at us, please.
Wave at us.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? So, we're here.
On with the show.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff to talk about this week anyway, and this will be archived for later on if people want to listen to it, So we have some new coaches, again. Lots of new coaches.
Again for the next time.
We keep getting new coaches. Lots and lots of new coaches at UCF, which is great and all because, we needed a new coaching staff after the last one. Sean Beckton's sticking around, though. That's nice.
Yes, and the football coach, nearly everybody, unveiled during halftime of Saturday's men's basketball game. So you got to see these guys up close and personal.
Their faces and see what they look like. A couple of those guys are big guys. Let's see if UCFsports.com has updated, or not UCFsports.com, but UCFKnights.com, I shall say. Let's see if they have updated the names of the football staff yet.
They did a news release following the basketball game, and that lists them there, whether they've updated
them. Yeah, look at that. There
roster.
they are. There they are. They don't have titles on them quite yet, though.
They're all mainly assistant coaches.
It's what it says, yeah. So they did say one of those guys, when they were talking when Eric...
Lopez?
No, not Eric Lopez. Kohler.
Eric for 200.
Kohler. Yeah, there's lots of Erics that we deal with here. There's somebody watching or listening. There's at least one person, so that's good. When Eric Kohler, maybe it's him, or maybe it's Eric Lopez. Maybe it's Brandon. It's somebody. Anyway, when Eric Kohler announced those guys, one of those guys was offensive coordinator, he said. So, and we really haven't heard that, I don't believe, before.
I'm racking my brain as to which one that was.
Yeah,
it was mainly the fan base, 5,000 strong, were standing up and cheering, welcoming them, and I missed Eric Kohler screaming out the particular titles.
Yeah, it was one of the first guys. So I guess if you go, I know on Knightline podcast Facebook page, that video is there, so you could go there and see that, or, UCF football's Facebook page. It's there. So
the couple holdovers, as we've been talking about in the lead up for the last couple of weeks, Sean Beckton, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe he was named tight ends coach.
Yeah,
when Scott Frost was giving out titles,
right?
Sean Beckton mentioned
I don't
tight
care
ends.
if he's whatever coach. I'm glad that he's here, and I'm glad that Eric Fish or Travis Fisher's here as well. And I'm glad that Kevin Smith is here.
They received big applause.
They did, yeah. I think Sean Beckton probably got the biggest applause out of everybody, except maybe Kevin Smith.
Or Scott Frost.
Or of course. I wasn't really including him in there.
And then we saw one of the newest names, Barrett Ruud, was there as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, these are good names. We'll go into these more a little bit later on with Brandon Helwig. That will give us. We always love to have him on here because he has like got his finger on the pulse of all of this stuff more than anyone else does, and he does an incredible job over there at UCFsports.com.
I didn't see the video that UCF Athletics posted, but I was at the basketball game. Did the new defensive coordinator, Eric Chenander, did he smile at all? Did you see any hint of a smile? Because I know you're looking for more of a scowl from this gentleman.
Yeah, well, like that mugshot of a picture that they put up. Yeah. So that was, it's interesting. I'm going to text somebody here real quick. So
we need texting music of some sort.
Yeah.
Dialing music.
Talk on.
Remember that
Trace,
old David Letterman thing when he would dial somebody and he'd have Paul Simon and the band do a little dialing music?
We need dialing music. Gosh, I should have done that. There was a couple things that I wanted to do for this and just never got them done.
Ooh, a live band. Wouldn't that be neat?
We could do that.
Yeah. I don't know where they're fitting in the studio
in
here.
this little room. Yeah, I don't think that we could.
You got to know
do
somebody
that.
who can fiddle around with a guitar.
Absolutely, yeah. One or two people.
One or two
probably.
people. A former UCF defensive backs coach, Kirk Callahan, made news over the weekend. Let go by the Gators after a 1-year stint as DB's coach there. So former Knight hits the unemployment line, looking for a job somewhere. So the new coaches named and announced there: Greg Austin, Sean Beckton, Eric Chenander, mentioned again as defensive coach, though still listed as assistant coach. Travis Fisher, a holdover and a former Knight. Ryan Held, Mario Verduzco, who was one of the earliest hires, Troy Walters. And then some of the names on the support staff, that included Barrett Ruud, Quality Control Administrator, Josh Lynham, Defensive Grad Assistant, Kevin Smith, Quality Control Administrator.
I guess Josh Lynham would be a holdover as well because he played here and, all that. So
if there was a missed opportunity from a marketing standpoint, you expected to hear from head coach Scott Frost when they were going down the line. I thought he was going to grab a mic and say something, and nothing. I think a missed opportunity there. I think fans want to hear more of that rah-rah and the cheerleading.
Now, did he actually talk or have a speech there after that little thing? No, they just introduced him and he waved. And
he waved.
That was
they went one by one down the line. And we were all standing and applauding and waiting for him, to just the rah-rah and the get us all rep. No.
That was
so a missed
weird.
Opportunity, and I'm not quite sure. But the microphone was not working for the national anthem with the elementary school that was performing the national anthem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Come on, UCF. Yeah.
So there was no microphone working for the national anthem, but the kids did a good job and the fans supported them. Strong crowd. Big basketball win. UCF now 3-1. 60-point first half. They just shellacked East Carolina. Have swept the season series with the Pirates. And then Wednesday, UCF travels to Tampa to take on the Cows. Could give them a 4-1 start in league play. It gets tougher after that, but when you look at the top of the heap there, SMU still undefeated, Houston right there, UCF right there with just the one loss the week before at SMU. So got to take care of business and win those games that you need to win. South Florida's in the tank. I believe they're 0-6 or 0-7 now, and like 3-15 overall. So no let up on the pedal. Got to go to Tampa, get that win.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's better than expected, I think. Even being 3-1 in conference plays. That's how many wins did we have in conference play last year?
5-13.
See, that's 3 already that we've got. So
it's a tough schedule. This is the easy part of the schedule. But when you look at the bunch up in the American standings, you see with the one loss, Houston's in there, Memphis, UCF, and Cincinnati, UConn, Temple are tough games. But UCF through 4 games, not quite a quarter of the schedule, is right in the mix there. And we'll see what they do when they face a little bit tougher opponent, but one game at a time. And now they go to Tampa. to take on South Florida on Wednesday. You got to get out of there with a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last year, UCF won that game at home and then dropped a big loss on the road to South Florida. But, as it changes year to year, certainly not the same South Florida team strength-wise as a year ago.
Yeah, definitely. There's things that they definitely have to do, but I feel like there's some improvement here. So,
offensively, they can score. How many guys were in double point figures? Enriquez, A.J. Davis, Taco Fall with a strong game. Justin McBride, again, strong. Matt Williams had 9, couple of threes there. So take care of business at home, and we'll see what they do when they get some of those back-to-backs against what are perceived as some of the tougher teams in the league.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really get to see a lot of it. It was an earlier. I miss games a lot of times because I think that they're going to be later games and they're actually earlier games.
4:30 start. But one of the strongest crowds, if not the strongest crowd of the year, 5,000 plus.
That's good.
The students are back.
I was watching, of course, my Kansas City Chiefs get totally wasted by. Well, not totally wasted, but they didn't do a great job. It never really seemed to come together the other day for the Chiefs against the Patriots there. I'm sure that someone will, give me trouble about that at some point for my Chiefs not playing good. But
what was that, an 11-game streak snapped
by the Patriots? Yeah, it was 11 games. 11 games. That's pretty miraculous, even to come from 1-5 and then come all the way back and win the last 11.
So that's the end of the road for former Knight Ja Reed.
Yeah.
And then the bizarre game, the nightcap game, Green Bay losing to Arizona in overtime, means the end of the playoff road for Josh Sitton.
Yeah. Was that not a crazy game?
It was a Hail Mary.
Another
Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary.
I'm not a big fan of Aaron Rodgers, but we were watching it, and I kept telling Tina, my fiance, she, watches football with me, but, doesn't totally, completely understand the game. So, and know, the players like I do. And I kept telling her, this is what Aaron Rodgers does. This is what he does. Don't be surprised if this thing, if he makes this play. Don't be surprised. He's going to come back and score. He's going to come back and score, and lo and behold.
What's your take on the NFL overtime rules? So if the team that gets that coin toss first scores a touchdown, that's it for the other team. I kind of prefer the college rules where they both get a possession. Maybe not starting at the 25 if you were going to talk about implementing that in the NFL. And certainly Green Bay had chances throughout the game to not get in that position. But basically you lose that coin toss. I know they give up the big play, 75-yard pass play that puts Arizona in position to score and win the game. Just think that the NFL should allow both teams at least one possession.
Right. Yeah. Maybe they should start them at the 40 or something, or even at midfield. I don't know. So, yeah. I don't know. The sudden death thing is kind of cool, where it is what it is. It's not real fair. But did you see the coin toss?
Yeah, there's a little bit of...
How weird was that? Did you see the replay of the... Mm-hmm. They did a slow-mo replay of the coin toss. Slow-mo replay. And the coin did not flip. And Aaron Rodgers was the only one that really, all right, well, the whole Green Bay side, they're like, it didn't flip. That's crazy, and you saw it.
Is it in the rules that it must flip?
Yeah, it's not a coin flip if it doesn't flip.
Or is it a coin flip or coin toss?
Well, coin toss, coin flip.
Couldn't you toss it without the flip? I guess they did.
Could.
I guess you can.
It's pretty rare that something like that happens, I think. So, I don't know. So yeah, we can. We'll take questions and comments in the little thing there, the little chat window as well. I don't know.
I'm monitoring that chat window, looking for questions.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know if honestly, I'm not even sure if there's anybody listening. That's perfecly fine though.
When we tried this the first time, it was not up against an AFC playoff game. So
yeah,
that may be a mitigating factor.
And then
it was during. Well, just at what was it, the tail end, wasn't it, of football season?
It was.
Yeah.
So people could be completely uninterested at this point.
There's interest.
Yeah, I think the replay obviously will get some plays. So I can never tell with YouTube how many people are actually watching because it says that this many people are watching, but it's never correct.
Well, you pointed out something on the last one that more often than not, and I had to do it tonight, is I had to log in as my YouTube username to do something to watch this chat room
right.
the way we needed it to be done. But I never do that.
Yeah.
I just click on a YouTube video, so I am never registered as myself.
Right.
And I believe you pointed out on the last one that there was a number that it showed listening, but then when you got the stats, it was significantly higher than that
right.
because people were just clicking in and coming and going, but we're not necessarily logged in as
right.
the username.
And there's many formats that this gets streamed out to as well because you could watch on our webpage, you could watch on UCFsports.com, you could be watching through Twitter. There's a link all kinds of places. So, yeah, it could be completely deceiving. So let's try. This is weird to have to do this, but let's try to call Brandon. Hopefully hopefully he remembered and didn't totally forget about us. There you go. Is that
Little Jeopardy?
Yeah.
I don't know that whole song, but
This is the weirdest. Yeah, I need to figure something out on this. Maybe we should have had him on the phone before we started or something. I don't know. Luckily, you cannot hear the phone number as it's dialed. We wouldn't want to give his phone number away. Yeah, so. We do need some music.
Hello.
Brandon, how are you?
Hey, how are you doing? How are you guys doing? Are we live?
We're live. I know.
All right.
We were just discussing this is kind of a weird way to do this. I've got to figure something else out on this, but for us to do it just by ourselves here, like not having a producer or something, it's like, okay, so I'm going to call Brandon, so hopefully he picks up, I said.
It's fine. I'm just going to have to check my phone every couple minutes. I'm getting live text updates from the cheerleading competition down at Disney's Wide World of Sports. So I'll talk and I'll try to see what's going on there and post to the dungeon what I'm hearing about the cheerleading competition. UCF's always right at the top, but I hasn't won the number one spot, the national championship, in a few years. So they're going for their third cheerleading championship tonight. So that's always on the Sunday night of the Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. So a lot going on in the world of UCF this weekend.
Yeah, that's cool though. Those guys, the guys and girls, are really incredible. The cheerleaders. They've got a national title at one point a couple of years ago, I believe. Right? A couple.
Yeah, they have two. I think the last one might be 03. Was it 99 and 03? I was looking at it last night, what years it was. It's been a few years, but, a lot of years they've been second place, third place. It's always, you talk about the top three cheerleading programs in the country, it's really Kentucky, Alabama, and UCF. Those are clearly the powerhouse cheerleading schools. And Kentucky just goes, they go crazy over cheerleading. All those people are getting full ride scholarships and everything else. UCF isn't quite at that level to do that sort of thing, but has obviously been nationally competitive, for the past 15 years.
UCF clearly the strongest in the group of 5 schools in cheerleading.
Without a doubt. There is none of that in cheerleading. If there was, they'd be Power 5. They'd be top of the Power 5.
Well, people need to remember as well that these people are athletes, like big time. They've got a lot going on there. It's not easy to do what they do, and I think, because of football and baseball and everything else, that it gets overlooked sometimes. But those are some of the best athletes on the campus, to be honest with you.
Yeah. In cheerleading, it can be a dangerous sport, with all the tumbles and flips, and, if something goes wrong, you can land on your head, hurt your back, hurt your neck. So that's really one of the, it's not just waving around. Different schools can have different priorities in terms of what they want to do. You look at USC, and they have their pom-pom girls, or whatever they call them, the cheer girls, and they kind of recruit them based on looks and, wearing the outfit, which is fine. I'm not complaining. But then you got other programs, they're not yeah, they're there to cheer at the football games, but that's not really what they're there for. That's kind of what they're doing to complement what they really do. They're really here to do competitions and trying to win championships. And as we're talking, I mean, looked up to see, you know, their finishes. It was 2003 was the first year UCF won the national championship in cheerleading, and the second one, yeah, it was more recent. It came in 2007. But
Okay.
there's been ever since then, there's been a lot of third-place finishes. There was a third-place finish every year. 08, 09, 10, 11, and 12 was a third-place finish. 13 was fourth place, and 2014 was second place.
Yeah, so
They're hungry. They're
yeah.
hungry this year out at Disney.
Yes.
That's great.
This is sort of exciting to have Brandon in a possible breaking news situation. Normally, you don't get him live with this
Absolutely,
sort of excitement.
he can, you know, give us updates. We will. You can hear it right here live. The updates on the cheerleading competition that's going on.
Brandon, how much sleep do you get throughout the year? I mean,
no, it's not that hard. You know, the great thing is that nothing usually happens in the morning hours. So, you know, I find time to get my sleep. I may be up late, but I don't have to get up at 5 in the morning like other folks. So yeah, I can kind of make up for it on the back end.
I just
this
hope you
time of
never
year,
get
but-
any sort of carpal tunnel, because you must be texting and typing and updating your webpage, and you're always doing.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of different now. You know, I know you're talking about, you know, recruiting, and you know, obviously that's hot and heavy right now with the first, you know, visit weekend taken, or the first big visit weekend. I know they had a few visits back in December, but it's kind of different. You know, recruiting coverage has kind of changed through the years with, you know, technology updating, and now everyone's got, you know, smartphones. Yeah, I know this is a novel, you know, but when you've been covering recruiting, it was just basic things like, you know, like I was able to, you know, post a fight to talk to Jaquarius Bargnair, star player at Orlando, Dr. Phillips. He committed in December, took his visit, so I just kind of posted a quick story about what he told me about it, and just being able to grab a photo that he posted to Twitter, and, you know, being able to communicate with all these guys in real time, you know, texting and asking how everything's going and trying to connect with other players. You know, it wasn't so easy 10 years ago when you're trying to, you know, that was maybe before people had texting, you know, maybe I was kind of coming into the fold 10 years ago and trying to get people on the phone, and then sometimes you're waiting for people to be home because they didn't have cell phones. A lot of high school kids didn't really have cell phones as much, you know, when you're talking about some of the, you know, early part of this past decade. So it's kind of funny how things have changed. They don't really, the recruits are always really, they don't really need, you know, the recruiting sites or rivals as much as they used to. They can pretty much broadcast whatever they want on Twitter now. So that's really honestly where a lot of the news breaks. It's going to come out one way or the other, but, you know, a couple guys did come out, obviously, and commit and, you know, tweeted about it this morning, that being running back Juwan Hamilton and linebacker Nathaniel Evans from New Orleans. So they have two of them down, and, you know, we'll see what happens with a few of the other guys who are here this weekend. Obviously, there's two more big visit weekends coming up the next 2 weeks.
We did have a decommit, though, correct, this week as well?
Yeah, you know, it was kind of expected. Quan Williams out of Georgia, it was really, I mean, terrible timing, even when he committed the first time. He visited for the Houston game unofficially, which everyone, you know, now remembers was the final game that George O'Leary coached, and everything that happened with O'Leary ended up happening that night and that next day with him stepping down. And I remember when it came out that he was committing to UCF, and I think it was that Saturday night, and I kind of had heard from some folks that, you know, something's up. You know, Leary, you know, his agent is talking with Dr. Hitt, and they're trying to negotiate something. And I'm kind of like, you know, this guy's committing. Like, I don't know. I'm not really worried about this right now because I know there's something bigger that's happening. So, but, yeah, it was kind of expected. I think from, you know, talking to his high school coach a couple weeks ago, it seems like UCF and, you know, this new staff with Scott Frost, I think they wanted to go in another direction, you know, with that scholarship, and, you know, thinking, you know, he may not be the best fit for what they want. So I think that was communicated to him a couple weeks ago, and he flipped today on his Georgia State visit, so he will not be part of the class.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I guess, you know, there's some people that just figure out that they're, you know, I don't know, need to either stay where they're at or do something else, or, you know, that they might not fit in or whatever. So I guess that happens with, you know, kids.
Yeah.
It's
It's interesting, though, you try to, someone just posted a few minutes ago, who do you think will, make up the final, members of the recruiting class? And it's like, I've got no idea. I mean, you're kind of learning this staff, as everything goes, and learning the different coaches and where they're going to recruit. And they're recruiting all over. One of the new coaches, Ryan Hell, tweeted that he's flying out to California. I know one of the other coaches was recruiting out there last week, so they're going to Texas, they're going to California. Obviously, they're still recruiting Georgia, Florida. Every day it seems like you see a tweet or something from a recruit, just got an offer from UCF. So, you're trying to figure out, who they're going to go after, and I think they're just kind of figuring out too, who would be receptive to come. And it's a big question. My quarterback is a really big one right now to see, and that's the big glaring need that, I don't think there's anyone on the roster right now in terms of, maybe Holman could do it, what they want to do for a year, but he's going to be a senior. And with the players that are already on the roster, I'm not really seeing a guy that could run Scott Frost style of offense. And that's the one big question mark that they don't have a commitment from. And I know there's a few guys they're talking to, but none of them are committed quite yet. So that'll be interesting to see, how that comes more into focus this next week.
Yeah, didn't we have a quarterback that was? I thought that they were going to walk on possibly that had kind of a name that's been associated with UCF.
Garrett Kruzek, the son of Mike Kruzek, long time, offensive coordinator from '85 through '97, and then when everything happened with G. McDowell, he stepped in as head coach, got the permanent job, was head coach from '98 to 2003, and I vaguely remember little Garrett kind of as a toddler. It's probably a spring game or something. I kind of remember going to the Citrus Bowl for one of those events. It might have been they used to have two different kind of things. They would have like a spring game, and then maybe a week before the season starts, they'd have some open scrimmage that would be played down at the Citrus Bowl. And I kind of remember he was a toddler and kind of climbing over the bench feeding around the scissors. I'm amazing myself now because that was probably even when I talked to him, I looked up. He was born in '95, so I might have been around '98 or something. He was about 3 years old, kind of ran around the steps. I remember, it must be Kruzek's son. So,
what do you know about him as a player?
He was a pretty good quarterback locally at Lake Howell High School. Father Mike actually, past few years has been coaching at Trinity Prep, but he could have played, I guess, maybe for 1 year with his dad, but he wanted to stay where he was because, he had been there with that team for a long time, Lake Howell. I remember the knock on him at first is that, maybe he was still a little bit short. I think he maybe had another inch or two to grow that didn't come in until late. I'm not really sure what exactly happened out of high school in terms of offers and whatnot. He did end up in junior college in Mississippi, and I didn't really hear a whole lot about him during the recruiting process, and talking to him the other day, he did get a few offers and some interest from some schools that were primarily out west. I think the big one sounded like it was UNLV. But, didn't really like the fit there and, just the opportunity to, stay home just a few miles away from, where he grew up and stuff and play for UCF. And, I think obviously the offense and then the change in coaching and all that stuff, I think, that kind of appealed to him more. I'm not sure if this probably wouldn't have happened if George O'Leary was still head coach, but I think, maybe there was some bitterness from the, I don't know. It's been a long time now, but, anytime you're fired from a school and everything else, but pretty much all those people that were there, are not there today and, all that stuff. So I think the mood in that family maybe had kind of changed a little bit now and remembering the good times they had being associated with UCF. So I think that kind of played into it as well.
Well, it's good to have a familiar name with a guy like that, around. So I think that'll be cool.
Well, it'll be interesting because you'll actually get to see the name. We'll see the name on the jersey. It's something
that'll be great, won't it?
It's been quite a long time since you go to a game and you actually see a name on a jersey. So that'll be cool, seeing that Kruzek name on the back of that jersey.
On many different colored jerseys, you're going to see names.
Yeah, that's it. That's.
So on Saturday,
on Saturday,
if you
guys want if you guys want to talk amongst yourself for about 30 seconds, I'm going to type out the update of the cheerleading competition, and I'll let you know what that is momentarily, okay?
Awesome. Yeah, we can do that.
We can accommodate
Okay.
Brandon
Yeah,
Hellwig with
absolutely.
that request, can't we?
Yeah, Brandon Hellwig, by the way, is the publisher
Guru.
and guru of UCFsports.com, which is part of Rivals Network, and Brandon does an absolutely incredible job on that website. And you can subscribe to The Dungeon, and there's another board on there that's free, but you get way more, and you get Brandon's insight on The Dungeon. If you don't know about that, if you're maybe listening and you don't know a lot about what we're talking about, because there could be somebody randomly on YouTube just be like, yeah, something's live, I'm going to check it out. And we're babbling about all kinds of stuff that they have no idea. But anyway, so...
Yeah, well, I'm back. I don't know what you guys had. I can tell you real quick what happened. The update of the text I just got. Kentucky, who I acknowledge is pretty much being the powerhouse in cheerleading, they just went. And the text I got about Kentucky is, what a machine. A couple of tiny hitches, but unbelievable difficulty. They're going to be very hard to beat.
Okay.
And it seems like the recurring theme through the years when, this guy texts me back that, Kentucky nails some unbelievable routine. That's usually sort of what I always hear. So it'll be interesting what happens, because pretty much I think the way it gets, it's the judging panel, it's always been heavily tilted towards Kentucky. So, for UCF usually in these things to have a chance, you need Kentucky to have a major mistake, drop somebody or do some unforgivable thing that opens the door. And when they don't do that, it's, we'll see how Alabama does, I guess. But seems like they're pretty much the favorite. UCF has not gone yet, but it seems like it may be very hard to knock off Kentucky.
All right, back to football real quick. Thank you for
Away from cheerleading.
Thank you for the cheerleading
Back to
update.
football.
We're all, very interested in that. But let's talk a little bit about the new coaching staff that Scott Frost has put together. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not put together completely. I thought that it would have been already. Now that it's out there, it really doesn't make any difference, the rumor. But if you were on the Dungeon the past week or so, the rumor for one of the vacant coaching spots was that Brady Hoke, the former Michigan head coach, was possibly going to come on down and be the defensive line coach. And I think it was a situation, from what I understand, Hope did not coach anywhere this past year when he was let go from Michigan. He kind of toured around the country, and one of the places he stopped at was Oregon. He went there last spring, was there a couple of days, kind of built relationships for those coaches, obviously including Scott Frost, and it sounded like, if you couldn't get another job, Frost saying, we'd love to have you be part of this staff. To me, it was kind of a little bit odd in a way to go from being a head coach at a place like Michigan to just being a position coach at UCF. That kind of threw me off a little bit, but it sounds like from everything I understood is that he was pretty receptive to it, had kind of tentatively agreed to the job, just pending any potential other offers that he might get, maybe to be a defensive coordinator, which is his background. And that's what happened yesterday. It was announced that he was going to Oregon, of all places, to replace their their demoted defensive coordinator. So Brady Hoke is not coming to UCF, where at one point it was rumored he would be assistant head coach and the defensive line coach. So I'm pretty much shrugging my shoulders right now. I don't know what's going to happen. There's still 2 full-time coaching spots left. With the way they announced the positions last night in terms of the assistant coaches, it looks like they need a defensive line coach, and I'm not sure how they want to go about assigning it. You could have a linebackers coach. They announced Eric Shenander as just defensive coordinator. I'm not sure if he's a defensive coordinator / linebackers coach. They could always hire a special teams coordinator. I'm not sure if they want to have a specific coach set up for that. So it'll be interesting. I'm not really sure where that other spot will be, but there are 2 full-time spots left. As far as my impressions, Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I wasn't sure what to expect. I don't think you really do when you're dealing with the first-time head coach and, in terms of who he's going to bring in. And, he's obviously going to bring in people that he's very familiar with. And, Eric Shenander, defensive coordinator, those guys, they were roommates back when both were coaching at Northern Iowa. And, Shenander, eventually kind of got over with Frost. They both worked at Oregon. Shenander coached for a year with Chip Kelly with the Philadelphia Eagles. And so there's a big comfort level there. I think kind of been described as, best friends and stuff. So that wasn't a surprise. I mean, that had kind of been rumored from Oregon folks, right when Frost got the job. Offensive line coach Greg Austin also has the Oregon ties, was a GA there, and went off and kind of did the same sort of coaching role with the Eagles under Chip Kelly, kind of assistant offensive line coach. So, and the interesting thing with Greg Austin is that he's a UCF alum. Not a UCF alum in terms of a former player, but he got his master's degree in the Roseland Hospitality Program, I think maybe in 07. My year might be off, but it was sometime in that late 2000 decade. So that's interesting that he can at least, talk about being a UCF alum, that he got the coaching bug and everything and got into it there. And, obviously he's retained Sean Beckton and Travis Fisher to coach. Beckton, a long-time receivers coach, it was confirmed last night he's going to coach tight ends. So that's interesting. Travis Fisher will coach the secondary. I don't know who am I missing. The other thing I was confirmed last night was Troy Walters, who really, I think, might have been really the first official hire for Frost, because remember that news came out a day or two after he got the job. He's going to be the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about that earlier, and I couldn't remember who they said it. Eric Kohler, called out the names of all those guys. I was watching it on the video, but I thought that I heard him say that one of those guys was offensive coordinator, and we really hadn't heard much about that.
Yeah, what I had initially heard from a Colorado source, that's where it's coming from, Troy Walters, who's a wide receivers coach at Colorado. Frost has said that, his background's offensive coordinator, all that stuff. He's going to, for all intents and purposes, Scott Frost will be the offensive coordinator. He's going to be calling plays. That's what he's been saying. But this is kind of sort of a learning opportunity for Walters to kind of grow into that offensive coordinator role. Yeah, he'll have that title, but it won't be completely his operation. Obviously, Scott Frost, being an offensive guy, is going to continue to handle that side of the ball. I think, obviously, with more of Eric Shenander being defense, that'll be his deal completely. So it is interesting. They really hadn't. It's kind of weird. They really hadn't confirmed any of these positions other than Mario Verduzco being quarterbacks coach. It was kind of a question mark. I was hearing rumors, and a couple of them really didn't come true. I heard a rumor that Beckton would be running backs coach, and maybe Ryan Held would be special teams coach, and that didn't come to fruition. Ryan Held will actually be running backs, and Beckton will be tight ends. I figured it was tight ends because I talked with a couple team sources when they had the team meeting about a week ago when the players returned after break, and I was told that after they had the big group meeting, Beckton went and met individually with the tight ends and talked to them, while Walters met with the wide receivers. So I kind of was prepped that he would be tight end. So yeah, and it is kind of interesting. They did do the big at the basketball game last night, kind of wave to the crowd kind of deal. Scott Frost did not address the crowd. I thought that he would. I was kind of surprised. It was kind of more low-key than I thought. He just kind of walked out, and Eric Kohler did his thing, announcing the names, and they all kind of waved, and that was kind of it. And the recruits were sitting in the corner. When that was done, they kind of came down. And from what I understand, right after that, I guess they boarded buses and went over to Epcot to have dinner. So
you wonder if that was Scott Frost's preference, or if that's just the way it unfolded from.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I see. We're all just kind of learning. Obviously, when you're dealing with O'Leary for years and years, you kind of know what he's like, what his mannerisms are, and you're kind of learning that about Scott Frost. How is he going to be in an interview type role? He's not really a rah-rah guy. He's not really one of those guys that just, wants to talk. He's very low-key. He really did his first interviews really for the first time. I know that press conference day was kind of a blur with everything going on. And the first time, really, he did a mass amount of interviews was, I think, a week ago this past Thursday. And he was very serious, you know, he barely cracked a smile, you know, kind of, he was very, very polite. He answered everything, but, you know, I think he's maybe kind of learning how much he wants to put out there as in the face of a program and, you know, kind of how he wants to, you know, carry himself. And so it'll be kind of interesting to see how that kind of evolves. You know, obviously when you're talking to players now, you know, you're talking to recruits going on these visits, everyone's saying, you know, very, very nice things, and, you know, they're very excited about the vision he has and kind of the swag, you know, with the whole, everyone talking about Oregon and the jerseys and the style of offense and all that stuff. Everyone's very excited about his vision there. So it'd just be kind of interesting kind of how he is from that, you know, kind of fan interaction standpoint going forward.
I'm ready for this whole thing to get going. I don't know about you, but
Isn't this going?
Yeah.
Are we going now?
I'm kind of tired of, you know, speculating and all that. I want to see it go. I cannot wait. So hopefully we'll know soon, I guess. I guess one of our listeners points out here on the chat that Scott Frost did talk a little bit on ESPN, and they had him over there, and I don't know if you got to hear that, Brandon, but...
Yeah, you know, they put it on, okay, UCF Knights on Twitter did put up the video clip, but I've been kind of preoccupied with recruiting stuff, so I have not listened to it. So I will take a listen to that a little bit later tonight.
Which coaches, if any, have you had an opportunity to talk more with in any sort of interview situation that you've been able to post on UCFsports.com?
Yeah, probably really the main one would be Troy Walters. I kind of exchanged a few messages with him a little bit, you know, hey, welcome to UCF, that kind of deal. Got to interview him that Thursday a week or so ago, did post that. You know, he's very outgoing. You know, he's an ex-NFL guy. You know, was a Biletnikoff Award receiver at Stanford, I believe, coming out in 1999. You know, he kind of had a little bit of ties with Scott Frost. You know, Scott Frost, I kind of sort of forgot this myself. You know, he really wasn't on anyone's radar as far as UCF until in the morning it came out that he was going to have the job. But he started his career at Stanford and was there for 2 years before he transferred to Nebraska. And even though he was kind of leaving Nebraska when Troy Walters was coming in, Scott Frost had a brother that was playing at Stanford, so they kind of knew each other. And I guess they just kind of met each other, you know, after a few years playing in the NFL. And I think Walters said they played golf one day. I think he said it was in 2003. Or no, it was 2008. It was one of those years. I think it was 2008 that they had golf, and they played golf in Phoenix area, and they kind of you know, became friends then, and you know, they sort of had a little pact. You know, Frost was like, you know, whenever I get my first head coaching job, you're gonna come with me, right? You know, so they kind of had a back and forth dialogue for years that, you know, when you know that they would try to, you know, reunite somewhere, and it, you know, worked out for it to be at UCF. So he seems like a real nice guy. Obviously, he's got an NFL background. You know, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of works out. And coach receivers are going to be doing a lot of different things. And, you know, obviously, you know, kind of the solid offense was with Becton sliding over to tight end. So that'll be an interesting dynamic how that works between Walters and Becton. Really got two wide receivers coaches, to be perfectly honest.
Is the tight end position a position that's used a lot in that offense? Because I mean, there's better people to talk to about, you know, how Oregon has done, you know, traditionally through the years. You know, I wish I would have known Scott Frost was a primary target. I would have watched every one of Oregon's games in November and that last month of the season, you know, to really I have watched. There is, for anyone that has questions about what Oregon does and get, you know, schooled on the whole terminology and the zone read and everything else, there's a website called fishduck.com. I think his name is Charles Fish. His last name is Fish, but he's some Oregon mega fan. And he puts together these great video tutorials where he breaks down the plays, points everything out. It's not just offense, talks about what they do on defense. It is a really great site just to learn more about Oregon, just football in general, you know, the whole Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich scheme. It's a fantastic site. So if anybody's curious about, you know, I don't know if UCF's going to be running that sort of thing. I don't know if they get the talent in place to personally able to do that this year in 2016, but eventually it will resemble that. And if anyone wants to kind of take a look at it, you know, kind of what all that entails, I highly recommend
going to the website called fishduck.com.
It seems like Scott Frost has done a good job of bridging the past and retaining Becton and Kevin Smith. What's your thought on that? There's a little bit of a bridge to the past and a little bit of a tip of the hat to former UCF players.
Yeah, it was, you really didn't know what was going to happen. When a coach comes in, all bets are off. Everyone could be gone. Maybe one or two coaches could be retained. It was just, you didn't really know. And it was a big question mark. Obviously, most of the staff was immediately let go. And, I kind of knew two of the UCF people had kind of been retained to recruit, and they went on the road. And, back in December, and you weren't sure if it was official or they part of the permanent staff and whatnot. But it turns out they are. We already talked about Becton and Travis Fisher. Now Kevin Smith will be quality control, which is, kind of a weird word. I don't know who invented that word to describe that coach. They can find a better word than quality control. I don't know who came up with that. But, it's basically, a coaching position. It's a step up from graduate assistant, but it's not quite at that full-time level. There are restrictions in place. They cannot go out on the road and recruit. Although Kevin Smith did go out on the road and recruit this past week, that's only because UCF has not filled up the entire full-time coaching staff. And so, even though they're calling him quality control coach, for this past week, he's been a full-time assistant coach. Because I guess they can kind of work the numbers with how many coaches you have, and, they know what they're doing with the, compliance and paperwork that needs to be filed. So, that's kind of the reason he was able to recruit in December and was being able to recruit this past week. It'll be interesting if he recruits this upcoming week, because you would think that they want to get the last two coaches in there. ASAP. Now that Brady Hoke's not going to happen, so I'll be kind of curious to see what happens. But yeah, I like what you said. It's cool to see Kevin come around, and he's probably talked about it when you've had Kyle Israel on your show, but I just know what Kyle had told me about Kevin, just in his football mind, and what kind of coach he can be, and I trust Kyle, obviously, being the quarterback with Kevin Smith those years. He's raved about, Kevin and his, obviously his knowledge and able to, kind of teach aspects of the game. And from whatever Kyle has told me that, he has a fantastic career ahead of him to be a football coach. So it's kind of the ladder you got to go up. I guess he was technically never a GA. But, that's fine. And maybe he might hold this role for a year or two, and then, probably be in line to get a full-time coaching job, whether it be a UCF or someplace else.
Well, Kevin Smith, not the only one being named a quality control administrator. The other notable name in the last couple of days was the hiring of Barrett Ruud, a Nebraska grad, known to many locals as having been a long-time Tampa Bay Buccaneer. So it'd be interesting to see what he brings to the program. Yeah.
And as Eric Kohler said last night, if anyone was watching the presentation, it was Barrett Ruud, the whole Barrett Ruud call out, which was funny to hear.
That was pretty cool. There's a guy, Daryl, here on our chat that's asking a question: is Dante Mayfield being recruited as a wide receiver or a defensive back?
I haven't talked to him today. I talked with him on DM. But everything that he talked about was wide receiver when I talked to him in December last. I'm probably going to call him here in a few minutes or tomorrow night or something just to kind of catch up about the visit. But he's always talked about it. Could that have changed? I don't know. Maybe it has, but from what I was not expecting anything other than wide receiver with him. So
okay, well, Thank you, Daryl, for your question. That was kind of cool to get a question on there like that.
NFL game has ended. Denver advances, and now the numbers are starting to. And if you're just hopping on now, we are live, and we have Brandon Hellwig, publisher guru of UCFsports.com, who is feverishly monitoring cheerleading results to see how UCF fares. Any updates on that?
Yeah, UCF went a few moments ago. Had a few hiccups. They did not do as good as they did yesterday in the semifinals. It kind of depends on what everyone else does. After Kentucky's obviously gone as well, according to my source, it appears second place is probably the best they can hope for. That it wasn't likely good enough to knock off Kentucky, so we'll kind of see what happens here through the rest of the competition. But barring something unforeseen, it appears that Kentucky is well on their way to winning another national championship. Although Alabama, I think, will be one of the last ones to go here tonight.
Awesome, yeah. So you're feverishly, doing cheerleading and recruiting and all that stuff. Tell us a little bit about, we haven't really talked to you about this. Tell us a little bit about a day in the life of Brandon Hellwig as far as trying to get all this information, and I don't want you to name your sources, obviously, but just, how does that all go together? What all do you have to do to chase these people down and, to get information?
I mean, a lot of that, especially with UCF sources, just kind of comes with being around for a while and knowing people and having friendships and a comfort level, and them having a comfort level with you to kind of trust you with information, that they, want to put out there. With recruits, obviously it changes, year to year, week to week. You just kind of, hit them up, say, hey, I'm with Rivals, what's going on, man? That's kind of what you're trying to do there. It's not all that hard to kind of set up the rapport there, but it's just, it kind of is. It is what it is. You kind of do what you do to treat people right, and hopefully, when the time comes, they might come back to you and give you some information that can help you out with, with reporting and whatnot. So I think that.
Segue to a basketball question. Garrett, who's chatting with us on the YouTube chat function, asking for the thoughts you have on the basketball team. Are you sold after the 3-1 start? Can they knock over the Giants in the American?
Well, the whole thing about, this is the easy part of the schedule. And in the first 2 weeks of the season, UCF was going to play East Carolina twice, which they've, swept that, and they're going to play USF twice. The second of that game is this Wednesday. So they are where they should be. I mean, they played 4 games and they're 3-1. The one loss was on the road to SMU. SMU is the best team in the conference. So it doesn't mean anything being the best team because they're banned from the postseason for everything they did with Larry Brown and whatever they did, whatever they did to get those 5-star recruits in there, altering grades, changing grades, whatever that is, whatever that was reported. They're not eligible for the Conference tournament or the postseason. So they did lose to SMU. That was expected, which really going to determine everything. I mean, it is an interesting dynamic. I mean, you got a brash new AD that has never shied away from making changes. They made a lot of changes. I was talking about Danny White when he was at Buffalo. He's not afraid of making changes. And UCF basketball has kind of wallowed in mediocrity the past couple of years. Now, a lot of that, or pretty much most of it, or all of it, is due to some of the issues. And some were self-inflicted with the NCAA sanctions, the scholarship limitations, haven't been able to play with, full contingent of scholarships, which really has impacted the on-court product. But and then this year, I mean, you think you're going into it with, your leader and star player, DJ Taylor, going to be a key part of the team. He didn't play at all, and bone bruise in his foot. And a couple weeks ago, they came out and said that, he's going to redshirt and not play at all this season. So that kind of puts UCF behind the 8 ball. They don't have a true point guard on this team. So despite all that, that East Carolina hopefully is a glimpse of what kind of team they have this year in terms of especially that first half last night. But it'll be interesting just to kind of, no one really has, like I said, when people come in brand new, I don't really, you're trying to get a handle for how Danny White is and what he wants to see, and you just don't know, what will it take for Donnie to keep his job? I don't know. I'm thinking, you play 18 games in conference. I think you at least got to have a winning record. That means 10-8 or better. You're 3-1 right now. So, you look at some of these games and you're playing the likes of ECU, which you won both. You're playing USF. You got to win those. You got to beat, Tulane. Some of the teams that are going to be at the bottom of the conference, you have to sweep those games just to, give you a chance. And then you would hope you can maybe knock off a few of these other teams, the UConn, the Cincinnatis, the Temples, the Houstons, the Tulsas, teams that are traditionally pretty solid. You could hope you win your share of those games. So, and now that's kind of the interesting story now, when we'll move on from recruiting, I guess, once signing day hits, to kind of see, how UCF is doing and, whether that's going to be enough to, I guess, get Donnie another year.
Well, you mentioned that stretch of games, which includes a couple of road games at South Florida, at Tulsa, and Tulane, but there are some back-to-back home games between January 26th and February 9th. They play Memphis and UConn at home, and then later Temple and Cincinnati. And, boy, you'd like to see if they could win 3 out of 4 there, and then I think you start to take them a little bit more seriously in the American.
Yeah, until UCF actually beats a good team in the American, I just really don't know how, where this team is. I think they're hopefully a notch above the ECUs and USFs of the world. You got to win on Wednesday at USF, which is a weird start time. I think it's like 6:15 on the road in Tampa on Wednesday. That's just one of the odd things, I guess, of probably on ESPN News or something, whatever that reason is. But then you go to Tulsa. Tulsa's a place that, UCS played, going back to the Conference USA days. They have, as far as I know, they have never won a game at Tulsa ever. So, that's a big challenge on Saturday to win that game. But, yeah, like I said, I kind of don't know where this team is because they're winning the games they should win. It's kind of when they, Tulsa is a team that's always pretty solid. It's how they're going to do against teams like that. And then when you talk about Temple, Cincinnati, UConn, the teams that are kind of regarded to be at the top of the conference, that'll determine a lot.
Do you make the trip to Tampa on Wednesday? Is that a road game you'll go to?
I was thinking about it. I'm not sure. I'll kind of have to see what's going on. It'll be one of those probably day of the game type things to decide whether I can afford the time to go back and forth. See how the traffic is or whatever. The 6:15 game to see what's going on. So I may be over there. I'm not sure right now, but I think I understand why they play. Now they've been playing weekday games. I think maybe it's better for the respective programs. You don't have to miss class. I think a lot of times they weren't even maybe staying in a hotel. Maybe they need to drive up the day of the game. I'm not sure how they're doing it this year. Obviously, you aren't going to have the missed class time that you would as if, say, you had to fly to Tulsa and kind of have back and forth days on planes. But it would be a lot more fan-friendly if you played these games on Saturdays, just knowing that's your rival game and you can promote it. And, it's just going to be tough. I don't know what kind of USF fans they have for hoops anymore, but, how many UCF fans, other than maybe those that live in the immediate Temple Terrace vicinity, other than that, I don't know who's going to be able to get there on a Wednesday night at 6:15. It would have been a lot better, more fan-friendly if they schedule those games for Saturdays. And even they played USF at home a week ago, this past Wednesday.
Well, the students were out.
And it was really stupid. The students weren't even back yet. I mean, that's one game that you can really promote and get people excited for to want to come to. And, I couldn't have UCF been playing anybody else that day. It didn't even matter. You want to have that USF game a little bit later, at least after the semester.
And it was like 3,000 in attendance. Not only that, making these difficult with midweek games, but so early in the season, within the first 6 conference games, the season series with East Carolina and South Florida will be over. And the American seems to place an emphasis in football on the rivalries and that I-4 corridor rivalry. And it certainly got lost with students not back from holiday break for UCF, and then a 6:15 start on a Wednesday seems a missed opportunity. I know these two programs are not considered premier in basketball in the American, but locally to drive attendance, I think a lot more people be willing to hop on I-4 on a Saturday to go over and back and forth for either of those games than certainly a midweek.
Well, it is kind of sad when you kind of look and see how UCF's fan support for basketball has kind of dwindled in recent years. I think it was, what year was it? It might have been 2012. I didn't go to this particular game, but I believe UCF opened the season at USF. This was when UCF was still in Conference USA, and I didn't go because I had a football road trip, I believe, at UTEP. But from all the feedback you got, UCF fans took over the entire building. I believe they were debuting the renovated Sundome that day, and Judy Ginshaft, the USF president, was visibly embarrassed when UCF fans outnumbered USF fans inside their building, and just kind of the enthusiasm has kind of been lost. And I think that'll be something that gets talked about more, maybe post-signing day when people kind of maybe more focused on basketball, how to get that back. Because, not that UCF fan support for basketball. It's not like it's ever really been great. I'm not going to say it ever was great because there's always been issues with, getting fans to consistently come to games and whatnot, and, a lot of empty seats and stuff. But it just seemed like it was just a little bit better, a little bit more passionate. Just not that long ago, a few years ago, and maybe the seasons of just not being all that great, and some of the mediocrity the last couple of years have kind of eaten away at that. But that'll be just kind of an interesting thing to see. Hopefully if UCF can get on a roll, there's some good personalities. I know people always talk about the A.J. Romsa days, and, first of all, A.J. Romsa, there's not any other player like him. So it's kind of unfair to compare personalities to A.J. Romsa. I don't know if you guys were around then to kind of know what kind of player he was and everything else. But there's some great stories on the great personalities. Justin McBride is fantastic. Just, his personality and what he does out there on the court. St. Taco Fall is, you never get tired of seeing him play, all 7'6" of them. And so there's a lot of good players, got good personalities on this team. And just for their sake and Donnie's sake, I really hope that they go off and have a really great season.
As we reach the first hour of our live podcast here on the 17th of January, and our guest, UCFsports.com publisher Brandon Helwig, a question on the chat function of YouTube from Daryl, asking Brandon, what happens to the several pro-style quarterbacks like Harris Schneider if Frost prefers the dual-threat quarterback? Will they transfer out, or is there a place for them to stay in the program? Interesting question. You had opened earlier saying, what's the quarterback situation going to be? You only have a year left of Holman.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, do you guys see any other position those guys could play? I really don't.
Well, wide receiver, but neither one of those guys.
Come on, can you really see those guys playing receiver?
Yeah, neither one of those two guys.
Nick Patty, I think there's a good chance Nick Patty actually goes back to quarterback this spring. It would make sense. He was an athlete and had some pretty decent wheels. Even Pete DeNovo always had pretty decent wheels. Bo Schneider and Tyler Harris really have not much mobility at all, let alone to be, quarterback scrambling in the pocket, let alone playing any other position. So, it'll be interesting. I just, with what Oregon has done, and Scott Frost, it's kind of an awkward situation for him. And, you have players that maybe don't fit your mold of what you want. But right now you really don't have anyone replacing it. Like I said, there's no quarterback commit of, some guy you're going to build your offense around. That, whatever that player is, I assume they're going to have to get some guy committed plays quarterback here between now and signing. They don't have that guy yet, so you may kind of have to adapt your offense at least this first year. But I don't know. I just, until Scott can really kind of see what they want to do, I'm just not sure they have a future in this program based on their skill. So they came to UCF because they thought you'd be running a pro-style offense, and, with what the Oregon quarterbacks typically do with running and all that stuff, I'm just not sure that they can do the same thing.
As you look at the calendar here, a couple of weeks until signing day, what else do you expect in the next couple of weeks? When is it that fans will get a greater sense of the schedule and some of the dates? That's farther out into spring, but what do the next couple of weeks hold for UCF fans as it concerns football?
Well, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, how they kind of, finalize this recruiting class. I hope they get clarification on exactly how many spots they have. It was going to be around 19 or 20. I'm not sure if that number has changed or not. UCF didn't really graduate a lot of players this past year to have a lot of spots available. This upcoming year should be the first year in quite a while where they can have a full 85 on scholarship. So obviously recruiting is the biggest thing going on, and basketball, as we've talked about, with big games coming up, schedule will get progressively more difficult after this week to kind of get an idea of where UCF is. But I would hope in the next few days we'll hear more about coaching staff. In addition to the two full-time coaches, they also have a vacancy as a director of recruiting. That's one other job they haven't filled as well. So it'll be interesting. I really, kind of when these coaching names that come out, you kind of know who has ties with Frost, but I really don't have a clue, who he could go to. I don't think there's any connection there. There's no past, but, who I always thought was an excellent defensive line coach at UCF was Jim Penagos, And as far as I know, he's kind of whistling in the wind a little bit. He was at Rutgers past few years, and that coaching staff got let go when they made a change. So, if you're looking for a D-line coach, I mean, someone that has to be, I'd give Jim Panicos a call. But, I don't know that. I don't know that would happen, but because I'm not really sure who Scott Frost, and I'm going to assume he had a guy in mind if the Brady didn't work out. I don't know if that's Jim Panicos or not, but I would assume we might hear more about that in the next few days.
We've touched a bit on men's basketball, but a brief mention, women's basketball off to a very rough start. Pick up their first conference win, but they're like 4-13 overall. Joy Williams and her crew not picking the best time in the world with a new athletic director to have such a shaky start to begin the season in conference play.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised she's still around as head coach. I just kind of thought, maybe that time would have come past few years. It's just tough, though. I mean, I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but I'm just not sure how many fans really, I don't know if I want to use the word care. I'm trying to find a more polite word, but I just don't know how much of a priority or, it's women's basketball. It's really tough unless you're the elite of the elite, which is the UConns and then a handful of other teams. It's just really hard to get a fan base together. It's just, I'm not sure.
One of the things that you just said right there should make, maybe Danny White and, UCF think about that a little bit in making that program more of a, national powerhouse if they could. If they want UCF to win in all sports, we have UConn right in our conference, men's and women's basketball. So
if you want to look at the comparison, you look at USF. UCF built a very good women's basketball program that at least has some semblance of a fan base. And I'm not, I would have studied a little bit more if I knew we were going to be.
Well, that's our direct competition.
But, I couldn't tell you much more about USF other than what kind of I gleaned from Twitter and stories and different things else, but it seems like people actually do care about USF basketball.
Well, for the UCF fan,
which is something I can't say about UCF. I just, outside of family and friends of teams and a handful of other UCF fans that I know that go to pretty much all the events, there's just not a lot of people that it's really much of a priority is follow women's basketball. So, it is what it is. They're not doing very well. It's hard to see that turning around. But yeah, it definitely looks like that could be a job that potentially could, open up here in a couple months.
Well, for the UCF fan, they're always directly comparing themselves to South Florida. As you say, South Florida's had a top 25 ranked program in women's basketball. What is the difficulty in recruiting for some of those sports with this second largest university and the push for athletics the last couple of years? There are still some programs that just really lag behind. You see some successes certainly with softball and women's soccer, but basketball, women's basketball in particular, is one that just has never seemed to hit the pipeline on recruiting.
Yeah, well, they've gotten some really good players, and then those players transfer when they're maybe feel like they're better than the program they're playing at. When you see top players transfer to Louisville last year, which was a big blow. They've had other top players transfer to other schools. Remember, there was a top player a few years back that transferred to Old Dominion. So keeping the good players here, has been a problem as well. But you're right. When you look at sports like that where pretty much no one's looking at, playing at the next level. I mean, I guess you could play in the WNBA, but for the most part, players are just coming. They want to, go to a good school, feel like they get a good education, want to go to a place that they're going to want to enjoy living. And with UCF, as you alluded to, has a lot to offer, with the campus and location, the weather, everything else. I mean, talent base, I don't know a whole lot about girls basketball talent in Florida, but you would think nationally a lot of people would want to come to Florida to play. I know it's an excellent soccer and softball state, but you would think UCF should be better than what they are. Let's put it that way. The women's basketball program probably should be better than what they are right now.
You just mentioned soccer. UCF making news this week with a connection to Orlando City and Haji Berry being selected by the Lions in their Super Draft 13th overall. Third time in 4 years men's soccer has gotten somebody in that first round of the MLS draft. So in other sports, you do see some pipeline to the pros.
Yeah, but, men's soccer has, frankly, been a little bit perplexing. They can have players good enough to put out there in the MLS draft, but as a team, has kind of struggled. Definitely are lagging behind their women's counterparts, the women's soccer team. So, it's like I said, I'm not an expert on college men's soccer either. I just know just the basics. I mean, you look at Akron, that's not really a school you would associate as being a powerhouse, but they are. They're a men's soccer powerhouse. So, I believe that's where isn't that where Orlando City got their first picks from? I think the guy they drafted came from Akron.
Kyle Aaron was with UConn.
Kyle, no, I'm talking about they had a draft pick in this past draft, their first pick. The UCF guy was their second pick. But I think their first pick, and his name is escaping me. I know he's best friend with Kyle Aaron because I remember reading Paul Tenorio's excellent story about it. But his name is escaping me right now. But I think he came from the University of Akron. And so, when you kind of look at men's soccer, that kind of the program of, what is Akron doing that UCF isn't doing?
In previous weeks, we've talked about coaches we thought might be on the hot seat. And you mentioned how men's soccer has not, of late, certainly been as strong as women's soccer at UCF. You could say the same of the baseball program, not as strong as the softball program. We get closer to the season for both baseball and softball, and you'd have to say Terry Rooney may be on a bit of a hot seat. Highly touted recruiting classes in previous years, and it just hasn't materialized in the American.
I mean, you're right. We were talking about things to look out for. I mean, baseball season does start next month. They're going to have to start practice here soon. You're right. Having made postseason here for a couple of years, when you play Division I baseball in Florida at a school like UCF, you pretty much should be in the postseason in the NCAA regional pretty much every year. It happens every few years, maybe. At a young team, whatever, it doesn't happen. But, you shouldn't go multi-years without going to the tournament. So, Terry Rooney knows that. That was the expectations that he kind of set when he came. And you're right. You got a new sheriff in town that's not afraid to make change. And, you don't have to say it. I know everyone knows it. Everyone knows what his background was at Buffalo. So, it's going to be a really interesting spring. You're right. I mean, you look at men's basketball, we kind of talked about, we don't really know how he feels about Donnie Jones. You don't know how itching he is to make a change.
Well, with his background and his basketball pedigree, I mean, you would have to think that he would really feel that basketball, men's and women's, had to be special at his school. So you never. Yeah,
he's a basketball guy. He kind of made that comment. I think he was talking about Scott Frost in that press conference. He made a comment. He said, "Hey, I'm a basketball guy." So you kind of wonder what's going to happen there. I just not sure I see women's basketball turning things around with their record. That almost seems like it's a very strong possibility change happens there. And then with baseball, I don't know where that kind of falls.
And you would think that Danny White would probably have some names right in his back pocket, just waiting, to to call somebody, with all the people that he knows as far as basketball goes. So,
well, speaking of White, what's your sense of him? Following him on Twitter and he being a bit more social media accessible than previous ADs, what have you gotten a sense of him in his first few weeks on the job?
It's like every other day we're seeing another $100,000 donation that he's publicizing via his Twitter feed. But that's interesting. That's something that, I think it's just a generation gap in some respects. That I always thought Todd Stansbury was not outgoing. He's a really nice guy, but he was not outgoing. He kind of came off a little bit shy. Wasn't, in fact, when he had that often talked about final farewell speeches, what we now call the farewell speech down at the Cheyenne Saloon during the summer, kind of his, sprint to the Power 5 speech that got everyone completely juiced to thinking the Big 12 is, come and call in the next week, which didn't really happen. Other than that, I mean, that kind of shocked me, but he really wasn't outgoing. He wasn't on Twitter, didn't really want any attention on him. Danny White's, different. He did say he's a younger guy. He kind of knows, he might be able to identify more with the average, UCF fan who probably the average UCF fan is probably around Danny White's age, which I think is about 35, 36 years old. So he definitely gets that aspect. I haven't had a lot of one-on-one time with him to kind of get a feel for what he's about, but he's definitely bringing in the donations. I know he's pushing this UCF Football Excellence Fund, which he really wants to pump up. I know they've been publicizing $100,000 pledges, but they're going to publicize that more to everybody. I mean, you don't have to, you're not required to get it. If you don't have $100,000, that's okay. They're going to be publicizing more of that campaign. I'm told they're building a website. They'll be, pushing that out around signing day and everything else. But yeah, he's definitely grown up around athletics. His father being, Kevin White, long-term athletic director. He's been at Duke for a while now, so he's got it in his blood. He's definitely, just sort of an athletic director. So, yeah, Scott Frost may not be the only new coach he hires in his first year on the job here at UCF.
Now, if you don't have $100,000 for the UCF Excellence Fund, the UCFsports.com paid site is certainly worth it. I used to just look at the fan forum, and then when seeing the contrast, there is so much meat in the dungeon for UCF fans. You really can stay on top of all of these things up to the moment, and you do really an excellent job, and we really appreciate you taking some time out to join us for this live podcast.
Hey, yeah, I always enjoy it, and I love the live. I think I haven't been following along to see how many you got, but I know people have really been really receptive to that and really enjoy the live aspect. And it was great what you did a few weeks ago. I think you had, and then you have Kyle. Did you have Carson Engel? Was that who else you had?
Yeah, Carson was with us as well. Carson Engel and Kyle Israel.
And, Carson's not very opinionated, so, you couldn't get anything out.
Yeah, that was really great. Well, thanks for having me. Always enjoy being on, and a lot going on, and I guess a lot will happen. It'll be a busy few weeks here for UCF.
Yeah, thank you very much for spending an hour with us, man. I really appreciate it because these things can be a little weird being live, but it's fun. I like it. We need to do it more often. I wish we had multiple phone lines. I have to work on that so we could maybe get some, call-in questions while we have a guest on here as well. But we're going to do that as soon as we're done here. Is there any more information that you can give us on the cheerleading?
I can check my text. According to my guy, is that Alabama had some bobbles from the start, but finished strong. Okay. He thinks, and then this guy's opinion, he thinks UCF may still have the edge to be in second place when it's all said and done.
Awesome.
So we'll see what happens when the final results come out.
I like how he says, "My guy, my guy." He's got a guy.
He's got a guy
at
the cheerleading.
I got a guy. I got a cheerleading expert guy that's reporting back. That's exactly what I got.
Awesome. That's great that you have your guys, man.
Got a guy at cheerleading.
It's awesome. Well, we appreciate you being here with us, man. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Thanks. I'll talk to you sometime later on. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care.
He's got a guy monitoring the cheerleading situation.
That is absolutely awesome.
A possible bobble by Alabama. That was certainly not the case during Monday night's national championship game against Clemson. I certainly had a bobble or two there, here or there, but they rolled to another national championship, do those Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I'm not. I said that Clemson was probably gonna, win that game, and of course I was wrong. Which
I think I'm going to start. I'm not a gambler, but I think I'm going to ask you who you think is going to win.
Yeah, and then you're going
to work in the point spreads, and then I'm going to find out how to bet the opposite.
Bet the opposite of
yeah.
what I say. Yeah, that probably would work good for you. Well, the number to call in should be on the screen. It is in the chat window there, 407-205-7427, 407-205-7427. We will take your calls if you want to call and talk to us about something. That would be greatly appreciated.
We want to thank Garrett and Daryl and some others that have asked some questions within that chat room function that we were able to work in with our guest for the full hour there, an hour with Brandon Held.
Yeah.
It flies, doesn't it, when you do this live?
It does. It totally flies. Yeah, we're at it's 8:19 right now. Probably lagging a little bit behind on YouTube. It just kind of always seems like it does that. Trying to do this and stream it to the internet, there's always, Sunday night especially is one of the highest internet, use times. So
A lot of things going on, though. That AFC playoff game just wrapping up a short while ago. Your favorite Denver Broncos advancing after beating the Pittsburgh
not
Steelers.
happy about that, but I guess I hate to root for New England, but I guess I have to now because they beat my Kansas City Chiefs.
We still have a rooting UCF-related interest in these playoffs in J.J. Wharton.
Yeah, being
he
a
was a
member
Ram
of
for 3 days, and then he inks with the Patriots. Not that we're going to see him in the playoffs, but
well, thank God that he's not part of the Rams anymore. I mean, in that turmoil that they're in and having to move and everything else, back to L.A. and.
Well, you hit on it. Back to L.A. They once stole the Rams out of L.A., and L.A. reclaims them, I guess.
Yeah, well, football has always been fairly big, and, I mean, they came to St. Louis and did some amazing things, won those championships, and with Kurt Warner and all that stuff.
So what do you think of Brandon's comments on a variety of topics? He certainly has his finger on the pulse of things. It's interesting to hear him reflect on that we still don't know everything about the coaching staff, and I think most fans felt that by now we would.
Yeah, this whole thing with all the coaches is just it's
different.
It's taken some time.
Yeah.
And it's different. We haven't experienced this for quite a while here, and a lot of us were quite interested in something like this happening. Some weren't, and it's interesting. I wish we had all the answers, to be honest.
We
with
want
you.
it on our schedule, but it's
Yeah,
going to be on
yeah.
Scott Frost's schedule.
I just can't wait till it gets rolling. I mean, like I've said a couple times already, I'm ready for when football ends for me. It's kind of like, I don't know. I feel horrible. Football
Deflated?
is
perhaps?
deflated. Yes, that's a perfect term. I'm such a big football fan, and the NFL's coming to a close. College football just came to a close. It's these few months. I'm not an NBA fan. I'm not an NHL fan. So there's not a lot for me to watch. I mean, I wait for motorsports. I wait for NASCAR to start. I wait for the IMSA racing to start, the 24 Hours of Daytona, the road racing, Formula One. I wait for all that stuff to start, I guess, and for football to get, coming back around. And, I'm becoming more of a Major League Baseball fan just because my Royals are starting to be good again. I grew up in Kansas City and not having a baseball team really from 1985 until,
20 years.
Yeah. It makes you not much of a baseball
30 years.
fan. Yeah. So.
But there's more anticipation now. We have things to look forward to. We're talking
Absolutely.
about coaching changes. We're not that fans don't always look at recruiting, but after an 0-12 season, it's a fresh start all across the board, and you're looking for things to be interested in and excited in. And this is what's happening now that we're interested in. We want to know what's going to happen next. And as I said, we want it on our schedule, but it's on Scott Frost.
Garrett mentions we'll wait for Orlando City to, on March 6th, I guess, to come back, and start playing. That's exciting. I mean,
I think it was a nice move. Certainly it's not why they did it, but to have that connection now with a UCF player. And if you read the Orlando Sentinel article, and one of their best writers, I believe, is Paul Tenorio, who covers Orlando City, who had previously covered UCF. Very thorough, very detailed, gets his facts right, spells his words right. He quoted City head coach Adrian Heath saying that we're like I'm part of Orlando City, that Orlando City is one of the few MLS teams that has a major college Division I program right in their backyard. So they have an opportunity to scout UCF players all the time. So to make that connection with Haji Berry, and he'll go into their system somewhere, most likely playing at the USL Pro team that's now coming to Brevard County that will be playing. That's a good connection to have, and Orlando City and UCF have really worked on
Where's that team going to play there in Brevard County? Are they building a stadium?
No, they're at, I'm not sure the city. I'm not sure if it's Melbourne. Where's Florida? Are they at Florida Tech's campus?
I don't know.
I don't know. I just know Brevard County.
Oh, I stumped Trace. There we go.
Stumped Trace.
Good.
Yes.
All right, well, like I said, we would take some phone calls here. Come on, guys. Call in. We need to. Our guy from Canada, I guess, is not listening because.
Hey, we got a guy.
He would have.
We may not have a guy at cheerleading like Brandon Hellwig.
We got a guy in Canada. He called last time. It was awesome. I know that there's a bunch of people listening, so I know Garrett, you're not going to call. You don't call, but you listen, so we appreciate that. We appreciate everybody tuning into this.
Melbourne. Orlando City B, OCB will be in Melbourne.
Okay. Well, somebody just got off, so maybe that was Garrett after I mentioned him on the air here. He may have taken offense to that. Well, I tried to get him to call the last time, so... All right, somebody give us a call, 407-205-7427. Unless that number maybe isn't working by chance, I don't know, but it's definitely not ringing, so I don't This is what's weird about doing live.
It's fun, though.
We've got right about 30 minutes left. We could turn this into a telethon.
Garrett
if you want
is still, yeah, do people want to call in with money?
Yeah, that'd
we'll
be
take
awesome.
That. Yeah.
We would definitely take some, we are definitely working on some advertisers. I know that we talked about that one other time, and there is a thing on our YouTube page, by the way, that you could donate a small amount. It's called fan funding, and it's just right to the right side of there. It would help us out tremendously because we do not make any money at this. Trust me, there is no money being made at all. So I'm just paying.
You haven't quit your day job yet?
No, in fact,
or your overnight job, as it is.
Yeah, it's an overnight job now. I just got a new job, and we'll be working 9 to 7 at night. It's definitely a long time to work. A 10-hour shifts. I'm in the medical field, and it's one of those things. So Garrett didn't hang up, but he's still not calling. Nobody's gonna call. Come on, somebody call. 407-205-7427. Otherwise, you're going to have to sit here and listen to me babble the entire time.
Well, they do listen every week.
Somebody's calling.
There we go.
Here we go. Hey, you're on the air.
From
Carson Engel.
Oh, it's Carson.
to accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
Carson, thank you. What's going on, man?
Absolutely, man. I'm just here with a couple UCF buddies and just tuned into the podcast, and they're like, "Hey, you've been on the show, so call up." So
Did you hear me begging for people to call?
Yes, I did a little bit.
Hey, we mentioned...
we'll throw them a bone. We'll call them up.
I appreciate that because I was starting to feel really bad here because nobody was calling.
Feel no love. We did mention you earlier that you perhaps
I heard
that you held back on your opinions a bit much the last time you were
I have to give a shout out to Eric Lopez because he told me that I was mentioned, so I had to listen in and see what you guys were talking about.
Well, Eric can call too if he's listening. It's all good. Yeah. So what's going on, Carson?
Not much. I just kind of heard you guys starting to talk a little bit about what was going on and the recruiting a little bit, and then so I figured I would call in and just see what was going on.
So do you have anything to add to that conversation that we were having before, like maybe with Brandon or any of that, or have anything to?
I didn't get to hear Brandon, so I didn't know in kind of what reference my name was brought up, but
well, he was.
I should clarify.
Yeah, he was talking about the last time that we were live and that you were on there as well. And that's pretty much it. It was not in a negative way at all.
Okay.
Well,
okay. All right.
when
I didn't think so, but.
When you joined us live, we were talking about the then very recent hire of Scott Frost, and you on our panel that included former UCF quarterback Kyle Israel. You were the more reserved, holding out some judgment there on Scott Frost. What's your thoughts a few weeks later and with some of the coaching hires that have happened?
Yeah, it's not a lot different at this point because I think, and Brandon touched on this from what I understand from what you guys were kind of recapping there, is that there's not. There's still a lot to know. There's still 2 coaches to hire. We'll see it. I think from what was kind of announced at the basketball game, it seems like there's still a defensive line coach position that's open. There's still a linebackers coach position that's open. So we'll see who they hire on that. I'm a little skeptical of just the experience level of the coaching staff and their relevancy to the Central Florida and state of Florida market in terms of recruiting overall. But at the same time, and I think I might have even said this on the show, you look back at Oregon, and that's really that's really the kind of model that Oregon as a program has followed, is that they'll go out and kind of hire guys that they just sort of believe in from a coaching standpoint, from a personality standpoint, and it's not necessarily all about, well, who has connections to this, or who is, who's perfect for this recruiting base, or whatever you may have it. They're just guys that they believe in as coaches and recruiters, and they hire them, and that may be someone at the Division II level, or that may be someone at the low Division I level, but it doesn't really matter. So it's one of those things that remains to be seen, and we'll see how great Scott Frost is or lack thereof, but we just don't really know yet.
What's your sense of the names that have come out during the recruiting process, folks that they have been talking to, that you've heard via Twitter or what have you? What's your sense?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I like some of the prospects that we've gotten. It's certainly, obviously, a different kind of player, especially offensively, from what UCF is used to in the past. I love that they've gone into Central Florida. I think they've been very aggressive in trying to build their reputation and say, hey, we're here, we're open for business. We're sort of going to run things a little bit differently than you're used to. So that's all been good. At the same time, I don't know that we're getting maybe a significantly higher level of player in terms of talent or offer level or star rating or whatever way you want to evaluate that, but I certainly like the areas that they're targeting, the recruiting bases that they're targeting in South Florida. I think they've rededicated themselves to that and was able to talk to, Travis Fisher a couple weeks ago, who was retained, obviously, from the previous staff. I think he was kind of trying to get UCF back into South Florida, and it seems like they're certainly making inroads there, and obviously what we saw early on and what we were able to talk on this show about just a few weeks ago is just they came into Central Florida right away and said, look, this is our baby, this is our area, and we're going to tighten this up and change the perception recruiting-wise in this area and start to get players here. So all of that's been great. I mean, really, you really can't knock what they've done, and certainly they haven't had the time or the relationship previous to really bank their whole efforts on. So they've been going by the seat of their pants, and I think really done a great job to hopefully by the time we're in, the beginning of February, they've got a pretty solid class put together.
To reset, Carson Engel joining us. Carson, share with folks who are not as fully aware of you as they should be, your credentials and where they can catch you and all of that. One of the folks on the message board said that Andrew and I need to do a bit better job of reintroducing people. We get caught up in talking, and so we're heeding that messaging.
Message board without criticism, right, guys?
Hey, that's constructive criticism, so this is an opportunity to
I love constructive criticism, especially on what we can do to make this better for the listeners. That's what we want to do. We do it for the people that are listening, so of course, if we can do something better, let us know.
I thought that was a valid criticism. So Carson Engel's joining us. Carson, tell us a little bit more about you and where folks can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I mentioned Eric Lopez earlier. We both co-host the Sports Talk Florida Insider Show. You can listen to that on Saturdays from 11 to 1 on 1080 The Team in Orlando. Obviously, also can get that online at sportstalkflorida.com. We talk a lot about UCF, a lot about local and statewide college athletics, and really just it's a pretty local Orlando show, and obviously we hit on the major sports topics nationally as well. And you can also follow me on Twitter at CAINGLE. I do a lot of athlete promotions work. I do a lot of different freelance writing projects, so you can find all of that right there.
One of the things we spoke with Brandon Helwig of UCFsports.com about was how Scott Frost has done a pretty good job of retaining a bridge to the past and that UCF connection, retaining Sean Beckton and Kevin Smith, Travis Fisher. What are your thoughts on the names that were retained? Certainly, who knows what was going to happen, whether he'd keep anybody at all, and he's kept a couple of folks, and those folks received a big round of applause during the halftime of the men's basketball game Saturday.
And I thought that applause was a really cool moment, and I hope that kind of Scott Frost realized, hey, like that meant something to keep these guys around based on what he heard there. I thought that was really cool, and I'm really happy with what he's done there. I guess Sean Beckton obviously is going to coach tight ends, and you just maybe that's not the biggest role in the world, and certainly in the Oregon offense, I'm not sure how much the tight end position is utilized, but just to keep him on staff, a UCF Hall of Famer. Basically a UCF lifer, super important. Travis Fisher, I mentioned him earlier, is a guy that I thought was critical to keep on the staff because, like I said, even during the final years here of O'Leary and Travis brought on the staff last year, I thought that he was kind of the guy that was trying to sort of rebuild the bridge that David Kelly had down in Fort Lauderdale and Broward County, and then also in Dade County and Miami. So I was very happy to see Travis Fisher retained, and certainly he loved that kind of Kevin Smith found a role there. He was sort of an intern previous to that, didn't really have a role. They gave him a quality control role, and then even keeping on Josh Lynham as a graduate assistant. I thought that was really, really good too. He's got another year there to be the defensive GA. So all in all, I thought that was cool. He kind of hinted in his press conference that I'm going to keep the lines of tradition and history of what's already been built here at UCF together. We're going to respect that and honor that. And he certainly followed through on his promise with that. And I think the fan base responded in a positive way at the game, and it was just a really cool kind of coalescing of everything for everything to come together in that way.
We get our arms around Sean Beckton coaching tight ends, and we know him certainly as a wide receiver some 20-plus years ago with UCF and having coached wide receivers, but some fans may forget that there was a stretch there where he coached defensive backs for a couple of seasons. So it's not the first time that he's switched out to a different position group.
Well, and let's remember, too, again, like I said earlier, kind of remembering and reminding everyone of the Oregon system and what they do with coaches. It's like, if you can coach, we'll find a place for you. So, Chip Kelly came from New Hampshire and wasn't really a well-regarded guy, and they brought him along in the Oregon offense and sort of taught him everything about it, and he sort of became a master of it. And you look at a guy like even Eric Shenander, who has coached on the offensive side of the ball and now is a defensive coordinator. And you look at Scott Frost and his background as being a quarterback in college, playing on special teams in the NFL. He's coached on both sides of the ball. So it is sort of a kind of, I don't think that they worry too much about where you've coached before. Certainly that helps in your expertise level. That comes at the table when I'm sure they were discussing, hey, how do we fill out the staff? But I don't think they're beholden to okay, so this guy's done this, he's just going to do this going forward. They're going to fit people in the places where they want him. So I think that's kind of how Sean Beckton was like, look, we've got a guy who's a UCF Hall of Famer. Everybody loves this guy. He's a guy that's been around this program. He understands the program. He's really the one tie we have to almost every era of the program's history. So let's find a place for him. And they decided that was, coaching tight end. Yeah,
I personally think that that's the smartest move that Scott Frost has made so far, honestly, is keeping, those guys, Fisher and Beckton and Smith.
And Lynham.
And Lynham, yeah. I keep forgetting about Lynham, but all those, that's so important to keep guys that are associated with your program, and Kevin Smith was a big name, out there in the NFL for a couple of years. So,
well, and I don't know how much Kyle's talked about it with you guys, but I know certainly I've had the discussion with him about Kevin, and I mean, he says that he's, if not the smartest player that he's ever played with, certainly one of the smartest guys that he's ever played with. So you kind of, in those comments, realize the potential that a Kevin Smith has to be maybe even more than what he is now with this UCF program. So I think that was a very smart move to keep him in the fold. Obviously, Eric Kohler was able to kind of play up the whole 24K thing, and he got the big applause, and that was cool to see.
So the men's basketball team, quick segue there, 3-1 in conference play. Do you have your ankles taped up? Have you jumped on the bandwagon? Are you a Donnie Jones believer after 4 games in conference play, or do you still want to see him play some tougher teams than East Carolina?
Well, again, that's a good question, Trace. If people follow me on Twitter, they kind of understand where I'm at with the Donnie Jones thing. I just think that people have sort of quickly jumped on the we don't like Donnie, let's fire Donnie. I think people have jumped on that a little too quickly, and I sort of take a step back and realize where the UCF program's been, where it's going, and I like what Donnie Jones has done with the program. I don't know ultimately if he will be the guy or not the guy, but I think that for the time being, as so far as that we know, as from what he's been given and what he's done with that, I think he's done a pretty good job. And obviously it's going to be very interesting to see what he does in the conference this year. Can UCF get into some kind of postseason tournament? I think that's extremely important But so far so good with Donnie Jones, and I'm always a fan of, sort of what, let's say, what the Pittsburgh Steelers have done, where you've got 3 coaches in a span of, I don't know, 5 decades. I think that stability in an organization is important, and until you really know that the guy you have isn't the right answer, I think you need to stick with that guy. And I think the jury's still out on Donnie Jones, and certainly early on in conference play, it looks like everything's going well.
You sort of raised something there that I thought was interesting in that you said, what sort of postseason play might Donnie take the Knights into? So for you, it's more than just surpassing 5-13 in conference play or even being a 9-9. You're looking for one of those. It's not just March Madness. There are other postseason tournaments. UCF what was that one that they were in a couple of years ago? The BigPen.com postseason. Remember that one? What was that one called? Something like that, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've been in a CBI Invitae, the college basketball invitational.
That was it,
they've been in an NIT under Donnie Jones, although that was whisked away by the NCAA infractions, which is another issue that we could get into. But they played in postseason, and I think that's what's important to kind of get back to. Again, like we're talking about, UCF basketball program that doesn't have a whole lot of tradition. Yes, they've been in the NCAA tournament, but that was in a very weak league in the Atlantic Sun, whereas if you basically, played a good week in the end of the season in the conference tournament, you got your auto bid. It was basically a one-bid league when UCF was in the A-Sun. So it wasn't, I'm not going to I don't want to downgrade those accomplishments, but it was kind of different than what you're talking about, a school playing on a national collegiate basketball stage year in and year out, and certainly in the American, UCF is on that level. So I think it's just important to continue to sort of build steps to where UCF wants to be. If you want to think about sort of a fair comparison or a fair expectation level for UCF, me and Eric have talked about this on the show a bunch. I think it's sort of, hey, let's just get in the NCAA tournament maybe once every 3 or 4 years. I think that's a fair expectation level for UCF, and you certainly want to build to that with maybe a postseason appearance this year. And I think UCF, they're in a good spot right now, and certainly if they play the way they did the other night against ECU, if they're going to play that way, they're going to be able to steal some games against some of the top half of this conference, maybe make some real noise in the American. And I think at the end of the year, if they do that, people are going to be pretty happy at the progress and the direction of where UCF basketball is headed.
Carson, do you follow Orlando City soccer at all and the UCF soccer teams? Yeah. How cool is that?
I was a ticket holder, yes.
Yeah, how cool is that to have Haji Berry selected by them and to have UCF and Orlando City connected a little bit since they're, right in the backyard here?
It's very cool. I think UCF, not only the men's team, but the women's team has fed off of the soccer hype, the hoopla, whatever you are going to declare it here in Orlando, and I thought it was really cool. It's very interesting how UCF men's soccer, and people may not know this that don't follow it, but it's become a pro factory for MLS. You look at, obviously, what you mentioned there, going to Orlando City. You've got Warren Preval, who was drafted a couple of years ago in the high first round by Montreal. You've got Deshaun Brown, who I believe is still with the Colorado Rapids. You've got Sean Johnson, who Eric and I interviewed a year ago. He's a goalkeeper for the Chicago Fire. So I don't know how or why or what may be the reasons for this, but UCF men's soccer has become a factory for the MLS, and that's a pretty cool thing to see. And certainly now with a connection straight here in the city is maybe even ups that ante a little bit. It makes it even more of a unique circumstance.
And one more in that list was Romario Williams, who was selected a year ago. We had
right.
him.
I was trying to remember. See, you're always on with that. I was trying to remember that yesterday, and I was like, Eric, I know there's another guy on that list.
Romario.
I can't remember his name, but
you can find him in an interview on the Knightline podcast back in the archives. We featured him.
Oh, there you go.
But you're right. That's 3 of the last 4 years UCF producing first-round Super Draft MLS talent. Now Coach Cunningham just has to translate that into less 1-0 losses.
Well, it is kind of true. They've had some NCAA appearances, but it would seem like you've got all this MLS talent. Maybe there's even bigger and better to come with UCF men's soccer. We know how good the women's program is. Maybe one of the best programs really in the country, one of the most tradition-rich women's soccer programs in the country. Maybe the men start to follow suit there now with this pro pipeline firmly established. And also, hey, let's remember they're able to use that in recruiting to say, hey, look at all of these guys that came from us and are in pros. I think that's also a huge jumping point for them.
And we've been talking a great deal about coaches on the hot seat, and perhaps men's soccer coach Cunningham not quite there. Let's see if he gets to the fall campaign for the Knights. But certainly women's basketball has started off rough, 4-13 overall, and just one win this last weekend over Cincinnati in conference play. It's a tough time, it looks like, for Joy Williams in this season. And then certainly we get to the comparison at that same time of year between baseball and softball. You mentioned men's soccer, women's soccer strong, and softball strong. Men's soccer, baseball lagging behind.
Yes, I think so. And the interesting thing is I know Coach Rooney a pretty good bit, because basically my entire time as a student, one of my largest roles, I guess, while I was still a student was that I was able to broadcast about a half of the baseball games on UCF Athletics.com at the time is what it was, when Mark Daniels didn't do the game. So I got to know Coach Rooney a great bit and really liked him. But at the same time, this is a UCF baseball program that hasn't been to the NCAA tournament in 3 years. And I think, like, I set the expectation levels for you guys with UCF basketball, maybe, hey, let's see an NCAA team every 3 or 4 years. Well, I think the UCF baseball expectation should maybe be a little bit higher than that, and I don't see any reason, especially in the American, why UCF baseball can't be an annual NCAA tournament team. So that is a little puzzling. It is a little concerning. There's certainly always, seemingly year in and year out, a lot of roster turnover there. So you have to look at that as well. I'm hoping that he kind of turns things around. Expectations are low. They were only projected, I believe, to finish 6th in the American.
And that's out of 8. And that's out of 8.
Yeah,
so it's not even out of a full 12.
So listen, again, I really like Coach Rooney personally. I know him well. He's a great guy. But at some point, you are what your record says you are. And I think that even he would say, hey, I think any of these coaches that we talk about would say, look, if I'm not getting it done, then I don't deserve to be here. And I think at a certain point you do kind of look at that and say, hey, where is this program? And certainly, like we talked about, I think when I was on with Kyle and you guys, T. White, his history is not that he's just going to kind of sit back and not do anything. He was very proactive at Buffalo, hiring and firing coaches when he felt necessary. So I do think Danny White's going to sit here in the spring and look very hard at Terry Rooney and hopefully all the best for UCF baseball. And I hope they break through sort of the slump they've had in recent years and are able to jump back up in there and get in the NCAA.
Awesome. Yeah, hey, Carson, thank you so much for calling in, man. We really appreciate it. You kind of saved us. I was on my knees begging here for somebody to call in, and you saved us for sure. We got probably about 10 minutes left here. I want to give an opportunity for other people to call in.
That other person to call.
That one other person that's out there that might want to call in. So thank you so much, man.
I always love what you do, guys. You know that, and love talking to you, all right?
Yeah, you will.
Hopefully someone else calls in, and a lot of fun, guys.
You'll definitely be back with us shortly, hopefully. Hopefully you will do that for us. So we love having you.
Absolutely. Sounds good, guys.
Take it easy. Thank you.
Yep. All right, thanks.
For folks that have stayed with us for this entire time, Brandon Hellwig, our guest earlier from UCFsports.com, updating on UCFsports.com the cheerleading situation and his predictions. Remember, he had said that he had a guy on site out at Disney monitoring. Updated predictions looking like Kentucky will win again. UCF 2, Alabama 3, Ole Miss 4, and then Cincinnati or Western Kentucky 5. But that's just a prediction, and I'm gathering from his source on site who's monitoring it.
His guy.
Yeah,
that would be 2 years in a row that UCF came in second in the national championship for cheerleading. I mean, that's pretty cool, what schools can really say that their cheerleading team is in, every year?
What
in the national
other entity that we have
at
finishes
UCF?
second in the country?
Right, yeah. All right, so the phone is open. So if someone else wants to call and close us out here for the last 10 minutes or even for a couple minutes and
shout out to Jessica, who gave us a nice compliment and has always been a big fan of the podcast. For her nice
and
words in
Eric
the chat
Lopez
function.
came up here and said, loving the Olympic sports talk because, there's not a lot of other, maybe Eric and Carson's show that talks about the Olympic sports at UCF.
And, of course, Eric covers the games, covers softball as the voice of UCF softball. So.
Yeah. And he does a great job at that. We love to have him on here, anytime and all that stuff. So, all right, anybody else that wants to call in, it is open for callers for sure. We're going to do our news and notes towards the end of the hour here.
Can I share with folks that are
we're
listening?
We're going to do it live.
That this is going to be live, and oftentimes because of just the way the recording schedule goes, sometimes these go really late, and credit to Andrew. He spends a lot of time making sure he gets the sound bites in and edits everything together, but they come out late. We get a little slappy there in the news and notes, and there's always a pronunciation that throws one of us off track. And this should be more.
It's normally me because I don't read these things ahead of time really, and I'm trying. My brain goes faster than my mouth does. And y'all don't really hear the mistakes that are made and where we start and stop when we do the podcast.
Or the giggling that starts because we've mispronounced a name.
Yeah, we've giggled for 30 minutes before and been like, okay, we got to do it. And I'm always like, we got to do this. All right, stop. This time we're gonna get through. We're gonna get through. And it's normally me that messes up. Trace, has a degree in
radio, television, and that broadcasting
and
background.
so you've done this stuff a lot more
but
than
they don't
I
train
have.
me to say Haji Berry.
Yeah. We've had some other names that were pretty interesting. If you could hear what goes on, one of these days maybe we will do a
blooper reel
or a live podcast of us doing the podcast that's not actually live. Maybe we could stream, doing, I don't know. But there's all kinds of
It's a family
options.
show when it makes it on air,
One
so
of the
to speak,
things,
but might not be if they're watching that live. We're under our best behavior.
Yeah. One of the things that has been discussed, and we were talking about this. I was talking with a couple of guys on Twitter the other day. We have thought about, and maybe you guys could give us a little bit of feedback on this. We're talking about possibly doing our own commentary during one of UCF's football games or / basketball games, or both. Instead of you tuning into the radio maybe to listen to Mark Daniels and in his group, or listening to the commentators on the TV, which a lot of times don't know too much about what they're talking about as far as UCF players. Of course it would be, if we did this, it would be 100% biased, and we would talk about the UCF players and what they're doing and what we think about that, and we could try to figure out who the other guys are. It could be a lot of fun. So
a little Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I don't know if it would be that stupid,
Snarky?
but yeah, that snarky, but
With a robot?
it could be. It could be pretty fun though. It could just have a little bit more of a UCF edge, and of course we would. ESPN did that kind of deal.
You were flipping
during
through
the national championship
The
game.
one I thought was most interesting were the coaches. McElwain from Florida, Muscamp from South Carolina.
and that was some pretty deep stuff.
X's and O's talk.
Big time. And if you aren't privy to that information or have never heard that kind of information, a lot of you're just like, wow. They analyze everything down to footwork by, linemen and things like that. So that was really interesting. I don't know if, we wouldn't get that far in there, but yes, Garrett mentions on here, it was Rabble TV that allows you to do this. It's a new platform on the internet. Rabble TV is what it's called. And I'm actually going to have a conversation with one of the guys from Rabble TV on Friday this week. and we're going to see what we can work out. And I have some questions for them about that. But this is something that we're planning on doing.
Maybe we can test it out for a basketball game.
Yeah, that would be fun.
A road game.
I'd like to do, football, of course, because, that's, what I don't know if anybody would listen to this. I mean, I have no idea if people would.
Garrett will listen.
Garrett would, yeah.
Thank you, Garrett.
Maybe Jessica. It would it would be awesome, though. I think that would be fun. So I think it was Garrett, actually, that suggested it in the first place. So Garrett wants to hear it, so that's good. Garrett, your name has been mentioned more times on this show tonight than anyone else, I believe.
You
Maybe
should send
except
him
for
a prize. You should send him some of that swag you have.
And, there's a couple people that I needed to send some stuff out to. Garrett, you're going to have to message me on Twitter and send me an address for you, and I will send you some UCF Knightline podcast stuff.
Yeah.
There's
stuff.
There is a little bit of stuff.
You have stuff.
Yeah, we want to get more stuff, but I spend, I do spend some money on this, so, yeah. So we got about 5 minutes left. I guess nobody else is going to call.
What's that number again?
407-205-7427 if you would like to. Otherwise, we're going to stumble through this news and notes, and this could be interesting, though. There are a few people still listening, so this could definitely be.
That are
one person just got off when I said that.
That are logged in, though. Again, the numbers the last time we did this showed much higher numbers than what shows. You got to log in.
You never know. There could be more than 7.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, it says more than 7, but anyway. I
miss our music now for this.
I don't
news and notes.
Yeah, I don't have that. That's not available right at the moment in this format, unfortunately, because we do have the news and notes music, and I didn't cue that up, and I should have. I'm still figuring this stuff out technically.
We're doing pretty good technically today.
Yeah, not bad. I hope it sounds good out there for everybody on YouTube. I hope that the sound is not like the sound for our live TV YouTube show that we did with Kyle and Carson, because the audio on that was horrible, and I apologize for that. That was totally my fault. I had a lot on my plate that night, so I hope that this is better. Let's try to do this news and notes. Am I starting or are you?
You're starting.
All right.
You're the odds.
So this is news and notes. UCF men's soccer and the Orlando City Lions have a player in common. We've talked about this tonight, as the Lions selected former Knights forward Haji Berry with the 13th overall pick in the MLS Super Draft. Berry is the third UCF player drafted by an MLS team in the first round in the past 4 years.
That's pretty good right there. Women's basketball got its first conference win of the year, 80-60 at Cincinnati. Knights now 1-5 in the American, 4-13 overall. Boy, that's not going to improve. Up next at number 1, UConn Wednesday.
Yeah, where are we at? See? Women's soccer kicks off its 5-game spring slate with a home match against the University of North Florida on February 20th at 1 p.m. at the UCF Soccer Complex. 3 of the 5 matches will be at home and are free to attend.
Softball started practicing. The Knights just a month away from a February 11th home opener against Liberty.
Oh, it's my turn again.
Do you like how the ones I wrote for myself were just one sentence?
Yeah, I like that. Schedule change for UCF baseball. The Knights are now set to host Florida on Tuesday, March 1st at 6:30 p.m. and travel to Gainesville on Wednesday, March 2nd at 7 p.m. This flips the schedule as the schools wanted to avoid conflicts with the men's basketball games.
Women's tennis with singles and doubles victories during the UCF Quad Tournament at the UCF Tennis Complex. Next up, Troy comes to town Saturday for a noon match.
UCF track and field earned 8 top finishes in the Kentucky Invitational. Up next, a one-day competition in Boston on Saturday. Wow, we actually got through that pretty good. Yeah, hey, Eric Lopez actually commented here on the little chat board. Yes, when you call in, it does go to voicemail automatically, and it will give you the opportunity to tell me who you are. So when you call in, it goes straight to voicemail, and then you have to say your name, and then it tells me so-and-so is calling, and you have to answer it. So it always goes straight to voicemail. There is no, like, call waiting type thing on there, so, yeah. So it's
All right, next time.
That's the way it works. I'm using Google Voice on that one, or I think that's what it's called. It's a Google app. Yeah, Google Voice. So I don't, it just makes it a little easier. I have a couple different numbers that way. So, I am going to work this out. We're going to do, different stuff more and more. I'm trying to come up with new things and all that. So we're trying. We're working on it. Every time we learn something, I've learned tonight what to do when you don't think that there's that many people listening. Maybe none at some point. I don't know. Anyway.
You're too skeptical about that. I think there are people listening, and we appreciate
We
Carson
do.
Engel for calling in and, spending an hour with us to talk about all things. We covered the bases, didn't we, with Brandon Hellwig? We got
Brandon
cheerleading
and
talk,
Carson. That's
soccer, basketball. I mean, we covered the whole gambit and the latest on football recruiting. So it was a fun 2 hours. Andrew.
absolutely. It is. It has been 2 hours too. So I think that's going to be it for us. Thank you very much for listening, y'all. And this will be, archived on YouTube so you can hear it again, and it'll be on SoundCloud and all the other formats. So thank you very much again, you all, and have a great night.
UCF, charge onto the field. With our spirits, we'll never yield. Black and gold charge right through the line. Victory is our cry. B-S-E-T-O-R-Y. Tonight our nights will shine. UCF, Knights. UCF, let's go Knights. UCF, charge onto the field. With our spirits, we'll never